Joey,
Yeah.
I'm sorry about what's gonna happen to you.
Guys. Guys! We kidnapped a fucking vampire. A ballerina vampire.
Abigail is directed by Matt Olpin and Tyler Gillette, also known as Radio Silence. That's what they call their director group. And these directors have given us some great horror films in the last several years with Ready or Not, Scream 5, and Scream 6, and now Abigail, a horror movie about a little girl vampire. And I was excited when I heard about this movie, so I went and saw it the other night with my wife. We had a great time watching it. Let's jump into the synopsis for Abigail. So Abigail is about this group of kidnappers who get hired to do a job. They don't know each other, but they all trust the person who hired them to do this job. And the job is kidnapping this little ballerina girl. And they're going to hold her in this house overnight. And her father will pay $50 million. And they'll all get a cut of around $7 million apiece. So it's a pretty simple job. Nobody has to get hurt. They take the girl, they bring her to this house, they tie her up in a bed, and they think now we just have to last the night. Well, that is where the fun begins, because as it turns out, this little girl named Abigail that they kidnapped is the daughter of Dracula, and she may or may not be behind the whole reason that she was kidnapped in the first place. And so she starts taking out her kidnappers one at a time, and she has a fun time doing it. Now, that is the most I will give you. If you watch the trailer, it'll pretty much give you everything for this movie, so I'm not going to spoil any more of it. I just wanted to give you a clear synopsis. If that sounds like a bloody good time at the theater, and I promise it is, well, then you should go check this out on the biggest screen possible. I had a really fun time watching this. Let's get into my positives and some of my negatives. And my first positive for this movie is going to be the unique and fresh take on the vampire genre. Listen, I've seen so many vampire movies over the years, but most of the time they don't feel fresh. They just feel like the same formula. You have a vampire, sometimes it's Dracula, sometimes it's just a one-off random vampire, and the people have to find a way to fight back against it and become vampire hunters, and by the end of the film, they beat the vampire. That's a typical vampire movie, and again, I love vampire movies. I will watch any vampire movie you put in front of me, but I know the formula. This movie, however, brings in this little unsuspecting girl, these mean kidnappers who take her. Some of them are really mean, some of them you don't like right off the bat. But then you find out that the real monster is the little girl. And so part of you wants to see what this little girl can do. And when she starts toying with them, when she starts messing with them, she even says at one point, I like playing with my food. You see how menacing this monster truly is. And it really was just a fresh and unique take on the genre as a whole. And that fresh and unique flavor doesn't even end with the vampire. I like that the kidnappers couldn't get it together right away. Like there's a scene where they have to all brainstorm, okay, how do we beat vampires? And they say, well, what are we talking about? We're talking about Twilight, we're talking about this kind of vampire, we're talking about this kind of vampire. And I like that, because then they go get garlic and that doesn't work. And so they're trying all these different tropes that we've seen in movies over the years, or some movies where it's worked over the years. But in this case, they don't know which methods are going to work. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, one of my biggest positives for this movie is how fresh and unique this film felt. That'll lead me to my next positive, which is the gore. Now, gore is nothing brand new to a vampire movie, but I loved the way they used it. There are moments in this movie where someone gets cut, you see a little bit of blood, you're like, all right, let's see how this thing goes. Someone gets bitten, it's not too over-exaggerated. And there are moments in this movie where something will explode and just a body bag of blood goes all over the room and all over the people that it's around, and it is jarring when it happens. It's gore done right, because it's gore that knows its place. It knows when it needs to go all the way to 100, and it knows when it needs to hold back and be like, is that bite going to affect somebody or is it not going to? Because it doesn't look too bad. It's just a little bite on somebody's arm. I like that they were able to hold back on the gore, but then really go for it when they needed to. Worked really well for me. My next positive for this movie is going to be the acting all around. I think they had a great cast of people. 3 people of note that I want to point out in this movie. The first one, of course, has to be Alicia Weer. She did a fantastic job playing Abigail. She had to play 2 sides of this character, the monstrous ballerina vampire side, and she had to play the little scared girl, and I think she did both parts really well. I look forward to seeing what she does in the future, especially if it's in the horror genre. And then the other 2 people I want to mention are both very well known in the horror genre at this point. You have Catherine Newton from a great movie, Freaky. If you haven't seen it, you need to. She did a great job in this movie. If she shows up in a horror movie, I'm going to watch it. And then you also have Melissa Barrera, who shows up in this movie, and she does a great job. I thought, seen a lot of people online saying she's very one note and she doesn't really branch out her character in this film, but I disagree. I think she did a good job portraying this mother who left her son a long time ago, but she wants to make things right. She just doesn't know how to. She also may or may not have a junkie past to her, and so you get the idea that she's just kind of scared and she's unable to come out of her shell to her son. And I thought she did a great job. So those three I wanted to say in particular did a great job, but there's a great stacked cast in this movie, including Angus Cloud, rest in peace. I thought for his minimal part in this movie, he did a great job. Giancarlo Esposito also shows up in this movie for a few scenes, and I thought he was really fun. So overall, I had a fun time with the actors in this movie as well, which will lead me to my final positive, because all of the actors contributed to this next point, and that is there is a great amount of comedy infused into this horror story, and it's done very well. Now, that's nothing new to Radio Silence. Radio Silence has done that with the movie Ready or Not. I found myself laughing several times in that movie, even though it's a horrible situation. Both Scream movies have a good level of comedy, and all the Scream movies have sort of been known for that balance of comedy and horror. But really, in this film, I thought they balanced it the best they ever have, because you'll have these horrendous situations with this vampire coming after them, but she's doing these ballerina twirls as she's doing it, or she's jumping on her tiptoes to get to her victims. And I thought that was done well. Like, they understood what they had, and they never tried to take it too serious, but they also didn't try to go too comedy. Like, I feel like there was a good balance of the comedy and the horror in this film, and they hit that perfectly. And again, this is one of my favorite movies of the year. So while I end my positives there and I'm about to jump into my negatives, I just want to say that I think this movie was done so well. Can't wait to see what Radio Silence does next. But with that said, let's get into my negatives. My first negative for this movie is going to be that the characters in this film make some really dumb decisions. And sometimes those dumb decisions have to be made to further the plot. I completely understand. However, the whole we're in one singular area like a house, and you know what we should do, even though there's a group of us, let's split up and look for clues, has been done so many times in the past. It's been played to death. So in this movie, when the characters continuously make that decision, like they'll all split up and then a group will die, or one person from a group will die and the other person will narrowly get away. Now there's four of them and they're like, all right, let's split up again. And then they'll just do that trope again. And that happens over and over and over in this movie. And it gets a little annoying, because the first time you're like, all right, y'all don't know each other. You can't really trust each other. The vampire even tries to play them against each other at different parts of the movie, and I liked that too. However, after a while, when they constantly make the same decision to split up and look for clues, eventually you're just like, all right, y'all deserve to die, because you're not making the smart decision to at least take this thing on all together. And it shows through the movie, because there is one moment where they do decide to group up and you're like, see, that would have worked the whole movie, but you decided to wait till there was almost none of you to get to that point, and it became pretty annoying. My final negative for this movie is going to be that the end is a bit messy. And what I mean by that is that the movie takes its time. It really does. In the first act of this movie, getting you to live with those characters, getting to live in that house that they've brought this kidnapped girl to, letting you get introduced to the characters, letting the characters get introduced to each other, so that down the line in this movie, they kind of understand each other a little bit better. Again, that really worked for me. And I'm not looking for necessarily a long, drawn-out film, but this movie called for it, because you get these group of people together that don't know each other, and they're going to have to eventually trust each other enough to take on this ballerina vampire. So again, the movie needed to build. But by the time you get to the third act in this movie, it's like they threw everything at the wall. They gave you a couple more twists that they didn't ruin in the trailers. And those twists, while they worked in the moment, I just feel like they made the movie messy. And that'll lead me to the messiest part of this whole movie, which I'm going to tell you right here, but I am going to spoil something. So spoilers, I'm telling you right now, big spoilers coming at you right here. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, I highly recommend you check it out before I talk about this, but here it is. You have the daughter of Dracula in this film. And so the whole movie I'm thinking, hey, are we going to actually see Dracula? And you do. And it could have been done so much better, but when he shows up, he just kind of causes confusion for the audience, because he shows up and he's this presence. You know, I have been known by many names, and I was like, oh shit, here we go. He's going to give his speech about how he's Dracula. And then he's just kind of pissed at Abigail for what she does at the end of the movie, which I won't spoil. And that kind of I thought it was weird. It was like they set this movie up so they can do more films in the future with some of the cast, but it wasn't necessary. I don't feel like we're going to get an Abigail 2. Maybe we will. Maybe it'll do so well that it'll get an Abigail 2. Who knows? But I don't feel like we need one. I feel like this is a contained story and it was done really well. And that inclusion of Dracula, even though I thought it was something that might be cool to throw in at the end, just felt like they were putting too much into those final moments of the movie. Dracula shows up, you're like, let's see how this is going to go. And it doesn't really go anywhere. And Dracula shows up and he sort of argues with Abigail for a minute. I'm like, I didn't want a father-daughter spat. If Dracula was going to show up, I want him to show up and rip some heads off, but you don't get any of that, and that was a disappointment. So while the whole movie as a whole worked for me, the ending moments felt messy and were a bit disappointing when you finally get that last bit of this movie. Overall, guys, I had a really fun time with Abigail. It is one of my favorite movies that I've seen so far this year. A lot of gory fun in this movie, a lot of comedy in this movie, tons of action. If you like vampires, I really believe you're going to love the Abigail movie. However, there is one more thing I want to say before ending this review, and that is that the trailer spoiled this movie completely. It really did. Minus the spoiler I talked about a second ago, which, yes, I admittedly talked about a spoiler. The trailer gave you everything else. It really did. Down to the last snip of the trailer ruined one of the big twist reveals of the end of the movie, which would have been so cool to see in the movie. Now, I completely understand that a trailer's job is to do two things: get you excited for the movie and put you in the theater. That's the trailer's job. So I'm not going to fault this movie for showing the fact that the little innocent ballerina is actually a deadly vampire, because they had to get you in the theater. Would have been cool to not know that. Would have been cool to think this is just a kidnapping movie and imagine that surprise when she's a vampire in the movie. That would have been awesome. However, I'm not going to fault the trailer for that, because again, it has to get you in the theater. But I am going to fault the trailer for spoiling more things throughout the movie. The trailer had way too much in it. It played in front of just about every movie I saw in theaters in the last couple months. So you are going to see this trailer over and over. It's not just, well, I'll avoid it on social media. It was in front of just about every movie I saw in the last 2 months. So when you get into this movie, you've seen these very important twists and reveals in that trailer already. So it did leave me wanting a little bit more. Like, I was like, well, you showed me all this already. Do you have any other tricks up your sleeves? And not really. Unfortunately, this trailer really spoiled a lot. So I didn't put this in my negatives because I don't feel like you can judge a film off of the trailer, because once you see a movie, you've already seen the movie, so you should be able to go back and rewatch it. And I do feel like this movie will have some rewatchability. However, when you see a movie for the very first time, there's something special and unique about that first viewing that makes you want to go back. Had I not been spoiled about so many things from that trailer, I think my experience with this movie would have been so much better. And then when I rewatch this in the future, I would think about how great of an experience I had dealing with the twists and turns that the movie Abigail gave me. Since I didn't get that, I don't have that same feeling. Like, I want to go back and rewatch it, but I don't have that same feeling. I hope that makes sense. With that said, though, guys, have you had a chance to see Abigail yet? If you have, let me know in the comment section down below. Maybe we agree or disagree on some things. Maybe you had the same experience that I did, where you watched the trailer, you enjoyed the trailer, but when you got to the movie, you were like, well, there's nothing new here. I've seen it all. Or maybe you didn't watch the trailer. Maybe you avoided it like the plague and you have watched Abigail fresh and you had no idea what was going on. If you did, I'm very jealous of you. But with all that said, though, guys, if you like this review and you want to watch more, don't forget to hit the like button, because it helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. All right, guys, we got to the end of my Abigail review, and this, again, one of my favorite movies of the year. This and Late Night with the Devil are really towards the top. I won't say exactly where, because in June I'll do a top 5 best of the year so far video, and I'm sure these will be in there. Well, I hope they're in there. But then again, if they get knocked out by something that's even better, I'm not mad at that. With all that said, though, guys, if you want to check out any of the other horror movie reviews that I've done on my channel, well, I've got all those right there, and I've got all of my 2024 movie reviews right there.